In today's episode, Breakpoint ushers in a brand fresh new era crafted by the voices of all of our listeners. Join us as we dissect all the feedback and decide what Breakpoint 3.0 will be together.
Welcome to Breakpoint, the ServiceNow Developer Podcast.
Hello, ServiceNow admins, builders, developers, and curious individuals that I say with the utmost love and respect. Welcome to, or welcome back to the Breakpoint Podcast, the ServiceNow developer podcast that seeks to bring you all the tools, tips, and tradecraft to accelerate your developer career. My name is Lauren McManaman, Senior Developer Advocate here at ServiceNow. This is my iPad in the lower left or right-hand corner, depending on how this video is flipped, and I am currently your sole host of the Breakpoint Podcast. I apologize if this is coming off as news. We tried to pepper this in as much as we could online, in blogs, in previous episodes. But if this is coming as a surprise, know that Mr. Chuck Tomasi, 14-year alum of ServiceNow, and even more years of podcasting under his belt, I believe, decided to retire in early September. So we want to congratulate him on that huge accomplishment, but also use this as an opportunity to usher in a brand new wave of feedback and innovations here at the Breakpoint Podcast. Now, like I said, this is a huge change, and we want to make sure that we're ensuring that that change is taken as an opportunity, not only to kind of challenge and push ourselves here at this podcast further. For example, I have never in my life done long-form, unscripted technical content before, but also use this as an opportunity to audit all of our listeners. You know, podcasts are a little bit unique in that it's very difficult at times to get feedback, right? If you're listening to this on all of our podcasting channels, for example, there isn't a comment section or something akin to that like you would see in YouTube or I guess on TikTok and other social media sites as well. And so since that we're starting this kind of new journey, we wanted to also use this as an opportunity to hear from you and integrate that feedback into the upcoming episodes that we have cooking in the back end. So a few weeks ago, to kind of supplement that lack of a comment section, we blasted out a survey. We let it run for a couple of weeks. I put it out on LinkedIn. I think we also put it out to the couple of groups that we have on the SN Dev Slack channel. And we want to use this as an opportunity to kind of poll our listeners on a variety of questions. And so with this opportunity to hear firsthand your thoughts and feedback, we want to dissect all of that here today in this first solo episode that I have, and also kind of format the show more aligned with what our listeners are liking, and also maybe make some changes to adjust for areas of improvement. So no point in burying the lead any further. Let's dive straight into all the thoughts and feedback that y'all had. Now, to kick things off, we're going to be diving into a question that wasn't the first one on the survey, but has already taken the biggest impact and is actually already being acted upon. So that question was, would you listen to Breakpoint more frequently if there was a video component on the Dev Program YouTube channel? This is something that we see a lot of podcasts doing, right? Is having that video component. Obviously, we're not going to think about integrating demos or things like that, because obviously that wouldn't translate to the audio only listeners. But hey, some people really like YouTube, and if anything, it also helps us supplement that lack of feedback I brought up earlier. So there's discoverability on YouTube. Some people like staring at our faces. I personally like to avoid looking at mine as much as possible. But, you know, to each their own. So the results of this question were fascinating to me. I personally didn't think many people would have a desire for a video component, but what we found is that there was a 48.3% of people that would prefer a video version, and there was 34.5% that really preferred either, both video and audio. So the reason we moved up this question is obviously because, hey, if you're listening to this on the podcasting providers such as Spotify or things like that, or Apple Podcasts, know that this is also our first video podcast. You can see this on the ServiceNow Dev Program YouTube channel starting now and moving on episodes forward. Now to dive into the question that actually started off this survey, right? Which was, how frequently do you listen to new episodes of Breakpoint? Now, this was a question I've been curious about for a long time. We get data on how many people are listening and how many people are downloading episodes, but we couldn't easily tell or abstract away how many were attributed to specific people and the frequency in which they were doing that, right? So if we were releasing 2 episodes a month, how many of those are being consumed by individuals? The answer here was also pretty fascinating. About 44.8% of our listeners listen to about 1 episode per month. I think it'll become a bit more evident why that is that way in the upcoming answers. We probably should have tied that closer together. But the second most answer, which was pretty surprising, was 31%, I listen to every single new episode. That is fantastic. So either our listeners are participating and listening to both the episodes that come out in 1 month, or half of those, one of the episodes that come out per month. Given there was such a high percentage of people that were listening to about half the episodes, that's actually pretty reassuring to hear, because it gives one of the temporary decisions that we've had to make about Breakpoint a little bit of a cushion to the blow I'm about to deliver. I think it's pretty evident to anyone that's been interacting with our developer advocacy team and seeing the things that we're doing online that our team in general is going through some pretty massive changes at the moment. Not only are we kind of weathering the departure of Chuck, but we're also getting a significant amount of change internally with the introduction of our new Chief Marketing Officer, Colin Fleming. He joined the company in about a couple months ago. It was right, actually, I think during Knowledge. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him, I think, on his either first or second day, which was pretty fun. But obviously with this new head of the marketing department, of which the developer advocacy team is part of, there are going to be massive idealistic changes, right? Colin's coming in with a ton of awesome energy, a ton of fantastic ideas, and then over the months, those have sifted down to our team's level, right? One of his huge priorities is the creation of quality content. I think this is something that I really respect about his overall plan, right? Is that a lot of companies, especially tech companies, really prioritize output over anything else, right? A constant churn of new, over and over and over and over and over to put out as much as humanly possible to kind of boost SEO and things like that. But one thing that he has emphasized time and time again, even on one of his first introductory calls to our marketing team, was we are prioritizing quality. Right? We want to make sure that even if we have to lessen the output, we want to increase the quality. And so based off of that feedback, right? And in addition to the fact that one of the other things he is prioritizing is in-person events, where our team is really blessed to be a part of a lot of those between the CreatorCon India, as well as the all 9 world forums, I think. There is a change in the amount of time that we have to create. Doing this podcast solo is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for me, and I want to make sure I can do it right while also upping the ante on the quality available. So because of this, I'm going to be making a temporary decision to ensure that is the case. For the time being, at least until Breakpoint can find a suitable co-host to do things and kind of split the responsibility of the show with me, we are going to be moving to a monthly episode model. So know that you're not missing episodes per se. We're going to be focusing on doing them once a month. Of course, as you can tell here, we're adding in the video component, as well as a couple more social media-esque type of activities to make sure that as many people can see this as possible. So I really appreciate the feedback of knowing that a lot of you listen to once a month anyway, so it's not going to be a tremendous, tremendous change if we also change the amount of production to once a month. Again, this is a temporary decision, is more so till we can find an adequate balance, but know that that is the other decision that we have been making for the time being. Now, the next question was one of those multi-select options. We had a variety of different types of episodes, and we asked people, what are your favorite types of Breakpoint episodes? And again, I really had no frame of mind of what was the most liked video. Usually when looking at our analytics, it is a pretty even spread per episode. So there wasn't a significant favoritism, at least in the numbers, right? But by looking at these answers, there is an absolute amount of favoritism for these options. 82.8% 8% of listeners greatly prefer product information episodes. So for example, the ones that dive deep into the newest, latest, and greatest features with product managers or the creators of the various things that ServiceNow is putting out. That was the landslide favorite. But again, people could select more than one. So if you're trying to add these numbers up, they won't add up because, again, it was multi-select. But the second close one, ironically, if the first favorite is, technical product information, the second highest at 55.2% was non-technical information, right? So soft skills, things about demoing, things about organizing your career, things about, those elements of a business type of role that are not the product, right? That was the second highest at 55.2%. And coming in third, we have 41.4% of people prefer the career conversation. So those were the landslide favorites, and it was a sigh of relief to know that's also the most common types of episodes we put out. But that gives me a lot of pause to really up the ante more so on getting product people on this podcast, right? It seems that everyone really, really values hearing from those people, and we want to make sure that we can continue to deliver on the overwhelming favorite that y'all seem to have. Now, the little bit of a heartbreaker to me was the not so favored episodes, right? The real slim percentages that people ranked as their favorite. The one that actually, it was a big surprise to me was that only 27.6% of people liked the event-oriented episodes, the ones that are kind of upping the ante before knowledge, or kind of, I think Chuck did one that was a road show of the feedback that he got from the World Forums last year. That was, a pretty slim margin. But in, thinking back, it makes sense. If you're not going to these events, why would you care about an episode about those events, right? So not everyone can attend Knowledge. Not everyone is going to World Forums or only in a couple of cities. So that is a good thing to keep in perspective, that this podcast goes out to thousands and thousands of people, and not all those are going to smaller local events especially. We can probably keep the Knowledge ones. After all, that's our biggest event of the year. But I will take into account to maybe reduce the amount we focus on things like World Forums or Snugs or more local events that are a small percentage of that listener base. And then we had the least favorites, the one that only got 3.4% of people saying that those are my favorite episodes of Breakpoint. And that, very surprising, I know I keep saying surprised, I'm a broken record, sue me, but were customer success stories and nitty-gritty details about ServiceNow, or like lesser-known features. Lesser-known features I can understand because, again, if you're not using that product or not using that feature, why would you care about going that deep? But customer success stories is very surprising to me. You'll see this later on in a couple other questions where people are highly requesting some of those types of things, learning from customers, learning from partners on success stories, but when ranked against other things, perhaps, they are still not the favorite, but, maybe still good to integrate in. Now, those three questions that we just covered were the last of the kind of selectable options. Every question moving forward is direct feedback, and I've got some couple of things highlighted as some star quotes from the feedback that I really want to highlight here. This should be pretty fun. The next question was, what are your favorite aspects of Breakpoint that you want to see remain constant through this next phase? So even if it's just Lauren at the helm, what are the aspects that you don't want to see drop off from Breakpoint? Now, again, these are write-in options. I did my best to kind of group them by theme. The one that made me really happy to see was the most common answer, which was kind of the vibe of Breakpoint, right? People commented that they liked the enthusiasm, the lightheartedness, the fun, even when focusing on deeper technical concepts, that we made it approachable, right? And that's something about my content in general that I really try to bring forward. So I'm happy to hear that people are picking up what I'm putting down. One of my favorite comments about this was, I love y'all's excitement about the platform, and I always walk away having learned something new. So just keep being yourselves. Doing this podcast solo, like I said, is kind of scary for me. It's scary to be talking directly to a camera with no one else here in the room. So hearing comments like that of like, just be yourself, just get used to staring at a lens and you'll be fine. That does significantly kind of boost my morale. So I appreciate that you also appreciate that too. Besides kind of liking the overall vibe and aura of the Breakpoint podcast, there was equal amounts of love given to both the technical topic episodes as well as the career conversations. And that really just kind of matches the previous aggregates on the percentages as well. One of the highlights I really love was, I love the insights that you don't typically get elsewhere. Hosting a conversation with someone who has a unique experience and perspective to share. And that's something that we're going to keep on striving to do. There are so many awesome people in the ServiceNow greater community. There's MVPs, there's product owners, there's positions that you might not even heard of. And I think one of the priorities of Breakpoint is to seek those people out and continuously deliver on finding more niche types of personas that exist in ServiceNow that kind of might align and inspire people out in the field. There was also a nice direct quote about they liked hearing about new products enhancements from the people who worked on them. And this is something that I wish we could include in marketing in general more often. So I'm glad we can prioritize it here at Breakpoint. Right, you see these conferences like Knowledge and the World Forums, and you see like a lot of SCs and salespeople there, and you see a lot of marketing people there, but not necessarily the hearts and minds, the people that bring these products to life, right? That are orchestrating the entire journey that these products go on, from idea to construction to something that exists out in the eco center. So I really like that people value that insight, that they kind of like learning how the sausage gets made. So I'll definitely keep that into account when creating and scheduling upcoming guests. And then finally, something that I like that people definitely wanted to shout out were outtakes. So this was something that you may or may not know, depending on how long you listen to our episodes. At the very end of the episode, after the song plays, after the final announcements, Chuck did this cute little thing about integrating in outtakes from the episodes. And I'm happy that they are getting some love too, despite being the very last thing. That's actually a nice little way of indicating you as like a true fan, that you stay long enough to hear the outtakes. So we'll definitely be keeping those here as well. And now you'll have a video component too. I'm like cringing at what the outtakes are going to look like for this episode, because God only knows the first couple of takes of narrating to a camera in a room by myself were not that pretty. Now on to the question that I dreaded opening. This is one of those questions that really makes you kind of confront yourself in the mirror and hear what people really don't like about the art that you're putting out into the world. And that question was, what aspects of Breakpoint do you think need improvement? Now, like I said, I was hesitant to even open this up on the Google form. I was like, oh my God, if people just start saying, we don't like Lauren, that's going to break my heart. But this is honestly the type of feedback that will help Breakpoint improve, right? Everything else is interesting from a organization and a scheduling perspective, but it's these types of answers that we need so that we can continuously improve upon this product, right? And so to start things off, I can't tell you how relieved I was that the most common answer was nothing. Like I said, it's not that helpful of an answer, but whoo, did that take the sting off asking that question to an anonymous group of people. But now onto the actual areas that could use improvement. One of the most interesting things to me, and it was honestly something I thought we were pretty good of, but again, it was the most common answer, was there was a desire to improve the variety of guests that we have, right? There's kind of this general comment that we keep kind of going back to the same well. And when I did look back on guests, there are a lot of repeaters. I think it's hard because every guest we've had has been lovely. And so if we had a lovely time with them and interviewing them, there is a desire to do so again because it was fun. But that is a good call out to continuously seek out newer people to invite and to elevate their voices here. Like there was this comment that we have had a lot of MVPs on this podcast. ServiceNow has a fantastic MVP program that changes its class kind of every year. But despite that, despite the constant churn, and despite the fact that it's pretty large, we have a lot of repeaters, right? We have a lot of repeat guests. So definitely something to consider. I appreciate that call out. And in addition to this, people commented, hey, we've had lots of personas that are developers. We've had lots of personas that are product managers. But there are other people that work in the ServiceNow ecosystem. Very true. Like executive leadership, for example. That was something that was called out. We hear from the people kind of on the receiving end of these macro plans, but what about the people making them? There was specific call-outs of like, hey, we would love to have Fred Luddy on the Breakpoint podcast. Hey, we'd love to have Bill McDermott on the Breakpoint podcast. And gentlemen, just know that offer, it's out there. So if you're sitting there on this lovely October 3rd, Mr. Fred Luddy and Mr. Bill McDermott, and you would love to be part of the Breakpoint podcast, know that the doors are wide open. In addition to this, there was the idea to talk more with meetup organizers, because there's a lot of new developer meetup chapters that would love to learn from experienced organizers, and even questions about the people that run our strategic events, so the people that are putting on creator cons and world forums and things like that, and how that all happens and how they could be better integrated into those larger programs at a customer level, right? These are fantastic ideas. Now, there was one type of persona that we got actually a couple of requests for that I do not think that we will be taking action upon. And that was the request to hear more from sales or SC type of roles. I know that there are a lot of amazing partners and people in our own sales department that listen to the Breakpoint podcast. Your viewership is so appreciated. But know that the persona that we're kind of striving to help the most are the developers, right? We are seeking to, it's in our introduction, right? The tools, tips, and tradecraft to accelerate the developer career. And so oftentimes there's a lot of ServiceNow things that focus on sales, and they focus on the products themselves and making sure those products end up into the right company hands. But that not necessarily isn't the role of this podcast for now, right? For now, we are focusing on the developer persona. There are a lot of SCs and things like that have amazing product knowledge. I would love to talk to them about that. But as far as focusing on it from a salesy perspective, we're probably not the right home, but I do appreciate the feedback. And then lastly, there was a really fun idea that I'm definitely going to try to integrate in this upcoming months, right? Is that someone wants a ServiceNow podcast crossover, right? There are a ton of ServiceNow podcasts out there that are fantastic. Breakpoint's not the only one. And so they wanted kind of like a podcast super episode where we feature at each other's shows. I love that idea. I'm going to kind of work on that on the back end. I don't want to overcommit to people I have not talked to yet. But I love that idea, so I'm going to shout that out as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't mean to change the tone of this episode. I know we like to keep it lighthearted. That was something that you seemed to say was our favorite part. But I must drop down the tone because we have to account for a funeral of sorts. And this funeral is based off of user feedback because we have received a piece of criticism that we cannot ignore, right? I will read it directly to not change the overall intent from this listener. The transitions between clip sound effects has to change. It makes me cringe. What else is there to say? So, ladies and gentlemen, another major change to the Breakpoint podcast is that in this episode, we will be retiring the reverse zoop sound effect in between questions. Gentlemen, please, if you will. Okay, this bit's over. But in all actuality, that is actually a great piece of feedback. When I joined the podcast, and I was learning how to edit the various things, Chuck was very integral about, okay, make sure to include this soundbite in between questions. I was like, oh yeah, what is that soundbite? Because I'd only listened to a couple of episodes before I'd initially been interviewed, even before I was brought in as a co-host. And I was like, it's kind of an interesting choice to kind of split up the questions in that way. And I'm not going to lie, it's a piece of feedback I do agree with, right? It kind of puts a little bit of a break in the action in between questions of what otherwise would be a pretty natural conversation. So yeah, say goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, to the transition sound effect. And then finally, our last question. Are there any topics or guests that you would like to see featured in the near future? Again, didn't really know what to expect here, so let's go ahead and start with the technical topics that we saw represented in the feedback. The first one, which again gave me a huge sense of relief, was Now Assist. As someone in marketing, I feel like we've kind of been charged to talk about Now Assist more than other people, and I'm always worried about it becoming, maybe a little overwhelming at times. So it was very nice to hear that people, they're saying it's not overwhelming. We're interested in Now Assist. It's the way moving forward, so let it rip on topics concerning Now Assist. Thank you for the permission. Another piece of feedback too was to focus on mobile, right? We talk about a lot of things builder-wise here at the Breakpoint podcast. We rarely talk about ServiceNow's mobile apps, and that is a good gap to call out, and I will prioritize adding in some information about the new mobile capabilities that we have as well. And one of the last pieces of things called out in the technical request was, again, more so learning about the background of product development. There's a couple of TV shows like this that are about how a product comes to life, like how these certain movies came around or how these certain products that are household everyday things were initially invented. So it's very flattering to see that people are also interested in seeing that with regards to ServiceNow's products too. Basically, there was a lot of feedback of like, hey, we're not only interested in X, but we're interested in hearing about the people that designed X, where they initially got feedback on X. So not X as in Twitter, but X as in fill in the ServiceNow feature here. So yeah, we'll be sure to include more of that as well. And again, there was a general request just to hear more from our MVPs and our customers, right? More people outside of the ServiceNow company and in the ServiceNow ecosystem. There were a couple of specific people shouted out. I'll keep those on the DL until I can schedule them appropriately. I really appreciate you calling out your peers and kind of pointing me in the right direction. And that covers all the questions that we had in the survey. Again, it wasn't a tremendously overwhelming survey. We wanted to have as many people answer it as possible. And I really appreciate all the people that gave us such amazing feedback. Thank you for weathering these changes alongside me. Like I said, this is my first time doing something like this. There's going to be a couple bumps in the road, right? I'm not sure how the video format will come out, or I'm not sure how many of these solo episodes I will be doing. But again, I appreciate your patience. Thank you for sticking alongside Breakpoint. And even more so, thank you for helping usher in this Breakpoint 3.0. So this wasn't necessarily noted on the feedback, but it's something that I'd like to kind of integrate for the people that listen to these episodes in a timely fashion, is also kind of integrate an end of the episode news segment to Breakpoint, right? Just a couple of things to highlight. We all the time highlighted them anyway, but just know that this will be a specific call out here at the end. Now, if you're watching this episode the day it comes out, which is October 2nd, 2024, know that you have 6 days or until October 8th to complete the hashtag Build with Creator Studio challenge. Similar to the past years of doing hashtag Build with AES and hashtag Build with RPA, this year, 2024, is focusing on Creator Studio, the new low-code IDE. Similarly to how it was in the past, basically we want you to build something with Creator Studio, do a nice write-up or vlog or infographic on that information that you learned, publish that to social media, and doing all that before the due date of October 8th will get you a very, very cool community badge as well as mug this year. Very nice. Don't have to deal with t-shirt sizing. How seamless. In addition to this, if you were listening to this actually anytime in October, know that Hacktoberfest is going on. Every year, ServiceNow puts together a team to participate in DigitalOcean's encouragement to participate in the Git community, right? To scratch the itch of source control, learn more about it, and build some awesome things with your peers. So Earl Duque on our team famously heads up this initiative with an entire repertoire of resources and videos, and also a lot of team members from our both internal ServiceNow community and MVPs as well. So please be sure to check out Hacktoberfest. And then lastly, again, if you're listening to this in October or November of 2024, we hope to see you out in the wild. The advocates are going to an amazing amount of the ServiceNow World Forum this year. We won't dedicate an episode to it. We learned it from the feedback. However, I just want to call out to make sure that everyone knows that we will be at the vast majority of these events. And now I can take a sigh of relief knowing that I've completed my first solo episode of Breakpoint. Woo! Thank you so much, listener, for joining me here today. Don't forget to check out the other ServiceNow podcasts. There is a ton of them, and they can be found, kind of weirdly, on the ServiceNow website under the events page of all things. You can subscribe to both this podcast, where all podcasts can be found, as well as the ServiceNow Dev Program YouTube channel, completely for free, so that these new episodes can be delivered directly to you. The Breakpoint podcast is brought to you by ServiceNow, with executive producer, me, Laura McManaman. And to find out more about the developer program here at ServiceNow, please be sure to check out developer.servicenow.com. Again, thank you for joining me here today. Stay hungry, stay humble, and I'll see y'all in the next episode. Cheers.
Please let us know what you think about this podcast. You can leave feedback or ask questions in the ServiceNow community. For more great information on ServiceNow development, check out the ServiceNow Developer Portal at developer.servicenow.com. Thanks for listening.
For reference, this is the third time I'm trying this take. Doing a podcast in a room by yourself with no one else is humbling. Organizing the company from this With regards to ServiceNow news, if you are listening to this on the day it comes out, which is October 3rd, just kidding, it's October 2nd.